Thank you, Lori. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. Northstar is very pleased to be back at Minnesota Realtors Unite conference. Northstar MLS unites over 90% of Minnesota realtors with access to listing data virtually everywhere in the state, either within the regional MLS or on our common data platform. We are stronger when we work together, and Northstar is proud to support cooperation and collaboration across the real estate community. And thank you for joining the panel presentation today, moderated by Nobu Hata, Business Unusual. Now, a little bit about the panel. Nobu is a real estate industry tech, marketing, sales, and industry outreach veteran. Nobu is now the CEO of the Denver Metro Association of Realtors and brings tactical tips, tricks, and advice based on real business execution to help real estate business owners succeed and thrive in a rapidly evolving real estate industry. Jeffrey Bray. Jeffrey has the distinct honor of being the co-owner and broker of Engels and Volker's Minneapolis. He started his career on a whim with some sort of 25-year-old complex that he could make the entire industry better. You've done a good job so far, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fast forward about 10 years into his career, when he and his business partner, Lindsay Bacigalupo, how'd I do?
Nice work.
Good job.
I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. We're given the opportunity to bring Engels and Volkers, a European-based real estate brand, to the Midwest. Also introducing Shay Hata. Shay is an Ivy League grad, mom, and residential realtor in Chicago, Illinois with Berkshire Hathaway. She moved to Chicago in 2012 and jumped into real estate in a brand new city where she didn't know anyone and was new to real estate. Within 3 years, she was averaging $30 million a year and now has a small team consisting of her, a buyer's agent, and 4 assistants. And last but not least, Jeff Turner. Jeff is an entrepreneur in residence for Second Century Ventures. Jeff specializes in helping technology startups understand and navigate the complexities of the North American real estate market. He's also an internationally recognized speaker on topics at the intersection of technology trends and human behavior. Currently, Jeff is in the midst of building a new real estate association management platform called Tangilla. How'd I do on that, Jeff? Could have been Tangilla.
It's Tangilla, it's Aboriginal.
Excellent. And is an entrepreneur in residence for Second Century Ventures, leads strategy at ImmoViewer, and is an advisor to multiple real estate technology startups. Nobu, it's in your hands.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And if I might say just really quickly, travel all around the country. You're working for NAR before coming here at Denver. You're the best. Northstar MLS is seriously one of the best run MLSs I ever worked with, and now that I saw every single one of them, boy, sometimes you don't know what you're missing until it's all gone. So, John, thank you for being an awesome progressive voice in this industry.
Well, I appreciate that, and it couldn't be done without the board of directors we've had over many years. So, thank you.
Awesome, appreciate it. Well, Minnesota Realtors, thank you for joining us today. I'm really stoked to be moderating this panel of yes, that's my wife below me. That it is weird, but yeah, she's an awesome realtor. Jeffrey Bray of E&V, who I'm a big fan of, and Jeff Turner. We've been BFFs forever, but to be able to talk about real estate with you, I think is a gift every time we're able to do it. So thank you guys for joining us today. So we'll be talking today, we got the next hour to talk about business unusual, which was, I think when we were kind of making this stuff or putting this together over the last couple of months, I think it's kind of segue into business usual. I think there's a lot of things that agents, team leaders, broker owners, technology people will be doing differently going forward. And most of it, frankly, is pretty dang good, and consumers have pivoted. And we'll be talking a lot about that today. So again, if you have questions, share them in the Q&A below. And I'll ask them, I'll save them towards the end. If there's any pertinent ones that come up, I'll do it in real time. But yeah, thank you for joining us today. I'm looking forward to this. So Shay, let's start with you from the agent team leader perspective. You had your best year. This has been a banner year and I think Jeff and Jeffrey will both agree with me. It's been a common trend that we've been hearing. People who've had their best year ever, even in a time when there were some issues, right? COVID, and then you've got crackdowns from government. Let's talk about, and we'll get Jeffrey in on this as well, but what did you do as things started to go south? How did you prepare when you were going into this pandemic mode? And I think the thing I want to hear is after it, like, what was the reality? Like, did you over prepare? What happened? So let's talk about that first. What did you prepare for? What did you do? What was your experience?
Sure. So I think that it's really twofold, right? It's the experience of what do you do with your business and what do you do with your clients? And those are two very different things, right? In terms of, for our clients, it was really a matter of over communicating with them about what we were seeing in the market and what we thought was going to happen on a week by week basis. And so it was a lot of personal phone calls to clients being like, here are your options, right? If I have your property in the market, you can take it off, we can leave it on, here's how we can do things to make you safe, because I think everyone was very nervous and they just didn't know what was going to happen. And that's still the case, right? I had a new seller yesterday who has a heart condition and is very concerned about having people in his property. And you need to address those head on and say, here are your options for how we can keep you safe. What do you want to do, right? And I think more so than ever, MLS data has been really important to me over the past 6 months since the pandemic happened. And I've utilized it much more so than I have in the past so that I can show to clients, like in Chicago right now, we're in a down market at the moment. Showings have been down the last 8 weeks. Under contracts are going down. And so having that MLS data available in particular has been really helpful to give to clients to have the data to back up what I'm seeing subjectively in the marketplace, right? So I think more so than anything, it's a lot of communication with clients right now about what's happening and what you think is going to happen in the future and how to best prepare them. And, we're seeing the market shift really on a week by week basis. And then as far as the business itself, right now business is great for people, right? I am concerned. I don't think that that's going to continue into the fall and the winter with COVID cases increasing. So we've been really looking at how can we cut expenses for our business? When things were quiet in March and April, going through everything that we spend money on and figuring out, is this crucial or not? And if it's not, let's get rid of it. So we got rid of a whole bunch of tech that we weren't really using. We kind of cleaned house. We ramped up our online advertising greatly because everybody's online right now. So we really put more money into our AdWorks spending, and we've been seeing a lot of great success with that. So I think, really look at what you're spending your money on and start to be conservative, because I think the housing market is, unfortunately, in my opinion, not going to be as great over the winter. And so we're all going to need to hold that cash.
And specifically, just for folks who know, Shay's in the Chicago area. Yes, lives in Denver, but her team is in Chicago. So good. So the reality, though, later was it different from what you prepared for? What was something that you prepared for but didn't come to fruition, or did that actually happen for you?
I think we prepared for the end of the world, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? Like, we prepared for the fall to, the sky to fall and nothing to sell. And the market was better than we thought it was going to be. And especially as people got used to this new norm, I think I didn't realize how much pent up demand there was going to be from people who were stuck at home, realizing this home doesn't work for them anymore and they need more space. They need office space. We didn't understand that kids weren't going to go back to school, right? And so now they need spaces at home for their kids. So what their housing needs have needed has changed. And that's really changed properties that are hot, right? Like, I'm finding single family houses are much hotter than they were in the past. Houses with pools. Everybody wants a house with a pool now, which they didn't necessarily want before. So, right. So some properties have really benefited from COVID and are selling at more of a premium now, and other properties are not. And so we've really had to adjust on a property by property basis based on what has happened with COVID and really capitalizing on this demand that people have for wanting to get into a new space before fall and winter. So that was the thing that was really unexpected for us that's changed. And I think some of the good things that have come out of it, you know, as you said, we've changed a lot of our practices. I just did 3 Zoom calls today with new buyers, right? Before I would have had to go do those in person, it would have taken a lot of time. I think we've learned how to be much more efficient with our time during COVID.
So Jeffrey, I think that's a really good segue to you, right? So from a leadership perspective, you're not selling every day. You know, you're in charge of agents who may be freaking out, maybe seeing some opportunity. What did you do from the ownership level? What did you hear from the brand up on high? I know you got a great corporate team. How did you make it make sense to your agents and to Minnesota clientele that you were dealing with?
It was a really interesting time. I think, you know, years from now, we'll look back at this and just really kind of be in awe of how fascinating and, you know, what an impact these last 6 months have played in such dramatically swift fashion, right? So like, we're here in Minneapolis, and then we're getting direction from each other, from our own local government. And then, you know, as you know, England Volker's corporate is located in New York City. And like what they were experiencing wasn't necessarily the same reality we were experiencing. So there, you know, I think that was just a really confusing time. And I think continues to be one of the most confusing parts of this whole aspect is it's different in code to zip code. It's different in city to city, state to state, and region to region. And so you look to, that's one of the most powerful things I think about being a part of a franchise like E&V is it's a small, you know, a smaller group of people, intimate group of people. We know enough people throughout our E&V network to call and have those discussions, and you're seeking guidance from somebody who may be experiencing something completely different than we are. And it's good to have that perspective. You know, you said like, what were you hearing from corporate? Well, they had a much different outlook on everything and a much different mentality in April and May than we did in Minnesota. It's scary for everybody, but I think New York certainly kind of, everyone would agree, is almost ground zero. I think they've been calling themselves that for this pandemic with the number of cases they had. And, you know, the decisions we made locally, you know, one of the benefits and, you know, positives and the negatives were a lot of the decisions were made for us. I mean, you know, we were like, for the first time in my lifetime, for sure, we're like being handed down executive orders as business owners. And it takes some of the guesswork of what we should do out of the equation, because we don't necessarily have a choice but to, you know, put signs up and enforce mask mandates and these types of things that we didn't have to necessarily come up with because they were just something that you had to do. But then in addition to that, it's then how do you communicate these things in a way that doesn't make everybody just completely freak out, right? I mean, that was an interesting time for sure, and continues to be.
You guys are actually kind of nailing what I saw across the country, and maybe Jeff can chime in on this. I'd never seen until this time the unknown kind of freak people out to the point where they're breaking down silos and walls that they may have put up to communicate with folks about what are you experiencing, you know, how is it in your market, how can I, you know, build in locally what's happening out there here in my state. The lack of federal leadership is really one thing. But the locality, people stepped up. And Jeff Turner, is that something that you saw? I mean, what was some of the other commonalities that you saw with people who actually were effective at this time and are thriving during this time and are like running with success going forward?
Well, so my experience is sort of sitting as a third party, you know, interfacing with realtors and with brokers and listening and trying to communicate that back through to both the technology companies that I help run and the companies that I mentor and talk to. The companies that have been most successful during this pandemic have been the ones who have seen it as this absence of touch and an increased level of intimacy. And I think with that brings this notion that if traditional systems are going to fail, if I've worked hard my whole life on X, think of this from a consumer perspective, it almost gives me permission to go and try something new. You know, if the whole world's falling apart, I don't look like I'm such an idiot for taking that situation and turning it into something different. And so I think there's this rearranging of priorities, and as a result, there's this reach for the essence of things that we're experiencing, and everyone's experiencing at the same time.
That's a really good point, Jeff. And that's something Shay and Jeffrey, maybe if you can chime in on that. Like, oh, go ahead, Jeff. Do you have something to add to that?
I think, Jeff, those are some very excellent points. And I would add, on top of that, of, you know, this pandemic being somewhat of an accelerator, it's also very much a magnifier. And I think we saw this for those that were selling in 2008, 9, 10, and 11. You know, change magnifies who somebody kind of already is. You know, in real estate specifically, there's always an excuse to either like try harder, or there's an excuse not to try, or there's an excuse to figure it out, or there's an excuse not to figure it out. And this pandemic was another one of those examples, and just how drastically life changed so fast, not unlike 2008 and 9, when things changed very fast and dramatically in our marketplace specifically. But it kind of those people who have these solid business plans and willing to adapt and can deal with adversity, they are having, you know, like Shay, some of the best years in their career. And for those who already kind of had that tendency that, you know, this was just another excuse to make it go the other way. And so it just kind of magnified what they already their mentality, what it already was. And it's a really, really strong and interesting point that you bring up there, Jeff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Hon.
I would say, I think on a practical note, like, you know, I mean, I'm always looking for ways I can make money in every situation, right? Like, that's always the bottom line for me, you know, and in terms of an accelerator, like what I'm seeing is divorces. Like, I am seeing accelerated people heading towards divorce with my clients, right? I just had one contact me yesterday for an exit strategy from her marriage and wants to buy a house, right? So, I mean, so for me, like on a practical level, to make money out of the situation, like I'm contacting every divorce attorney I can and starting to develop relationships with them, because I know that's what's coming down the pike, right? And when people get divorced, their housing needs change. That's an opportunity. Same thing with babies. Like, we're gonna have a lot of babies next year because everybody's been home, and if their marriage is happy, you know, that's what's going on, right? So it's like, you know, so start to figure out how
if you're lucky.
Right. If you're lucky, you know, and you're not exhausted from your own children already. You know, it's like, you know, so figure out what are those opportunities, right? Start contacting divorce attorneys, start contacting, you know, doulas and you know, midwives and things like that. Start forming those relationships, because that's what's going to be coming down the pike soon. So figure out where those, you know, what has accelerated. Those are two obvious areas, and start to make those relationships now.
I think the magnifier analogy is a great one too, because if you think about it, a great marriage, you're still going to struggle through things in a pandemic, you know, because situations change. But a bad marriage, you know, everything seems worse when you can't get away. You know, you can travel, or you can go off to work and get away for a few hours. But when you're stuck together in the house, it does magnify things. And on the technology side, it's also magnifying where the trends were already leading. And so,
Amazon made more money.
Amazon made more money. And in prop tech, if you take a look at it, so everyone knows this, and there's lots of reasons. And this isn't to say that the venture capital people are wrong about Zillow, but Zillow's never made money. They've never made a profit, not a single quarter, not ever. They've never made money, okay? The only way a highly leveraged venture capital funded technology company can make money, and this is a great quote from Natalie Karaneva, CEO of Propy. She wrote about this in Forbes last year. She said, the only way one of these companies can make money is if they transition into a market participant that actually charges the most in the transaction. They have to become a mortgage provider. They have to become a real estate brokerage. They have to become an escrow title company. And so now what are we seeing? We're seeing Zillow having to transition into that, because all of the tech VC funding was moving away from the front end to the back end. There's 10 times more value, 10 times more money opportunity on the back end. If there's $170 billion in back end transaction fees on $1.7 trillion worth of housing sales, that's $100 billion worth of potential profit involved in speeding, reducing friction, creating automation on those back-end processes. And I believe the pandemic has just even forced more of that into an accelerated state because it magnifies the need for those things.
Let's talk about that. I do want to nail that with you, Jeffrey and Shay, because what I saw in both your guys' brands and the pivots that you guys did was this empathy for what the consumer is going through. And this pivot to making sure that your business solutions that you're offering does that, right? So it removes the friction, it lends to your brand, but also instills confidence with people who are freaking out, right? So Shay, maybe talk about one or two things. What did you do to pivot? You already did a lot, but what did you pivot? Maybe Jeffrey, from the enterprise point of view, what did you guys do to pivot to a more consumer-oriented approach? Because right now, most broker and agent tech makes me, the agent and the broker, feel good, has never been consumer oriented. So Shay, why don't you start out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got off of tech as much as we could, right? Like, I feel like with this pandemic, people need to feel that they're taken care of, and that human connection feels so lost for a lot of people, especially your single clients out there who have no one to touch, hug, etc. Right? So it was figuring out how could we really like virtually wrap our arms around our clients and take care of them and hug them and hold them and tell them it was going to be okay, right? And that was silly, stupid things, right? Like, you know, we connected with the Girl Scouts because they couldn't sell all their Girl Scout cookies. And so we bought 3 boxes of Girl Scout cookies for all of our clients. We dropped them off on their front porch. You know, this was like the first, second week of the pandemic, you know, when everyone was really freaking out. And it was just a nice thing for them to go and open at the front door. It felt really safe. You know, we've been doing socially distanced porch photos. We've been sending a photographer over to their house to take photos of them that they can use on their Christmas cards, et cetera. You know, so I think in a lot of ways it's about getting away from the tech and figuring out how can you have that personal connection with people when you can't really interact with them the same, you know? So we're doing Thanksgiving pie pickups. They're going to come by my office. We're going to hand it to them through their car window, you know? So doing these things in a safe manner to make them feel really supported, you know, sending them Starbucks gift cards in the mail so they can go get a Starbucks pickup, you know, dropping off bottles of wine at parents' houses who, you know, are having a really hard time with e-learning with their kids, you know. Think about how you can get creative with that stuff. We're going to hire Santa to do Zoom calls with our clients because, you know, we don't know if they're going to be able to see Santa this year, you know. So get off of the tech in some ways and think about how can you make that personal connection with people.
You're almost using tech to get away from tech, right? Because you have to use it right now in order to kind of facilitate some conversations, but to get them off of it, to make them feel good is something that technology can't do. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Money well spent, hon. Good job.
People will remember the people who care about them. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they will remember, and that's what will get you their long-term business if they feel like you cared.
Yeah. Jeffrey, what about you from the broker owner perspective? You got to get buy-in, right? You got to have agents doing the stuff that you know is important in your heart, but they gotta address their bottom line, right?
Yeah, and you know, that's been one of the hardest things, you know, even just for me personally, is, you know, when we brought E&V to the Minneapolis area just over 5 years ago, you know, one of the commitments we made was that we're going to be a very personal touch, high-end service, like. And that's what we're going to give to the advisors that are here. And then in return, we expect that that's kind of what they're going to give to their consumers. And then like overnight, the ability to even like see them in person and have the collective collaboration and the culture that we're so proud of kind of just like got taken from us. So it required like immediate action. And at the brokerage level, and the business level, you're always, if you're doing it right, in my opinion, you wake up every single day thinking, how can we help support these advisors so that they can help support their clients? I mean, that is like at the foundation of what I think a good managing brokerage leadership team can be doing on a daily basis. And so a lot of the stuff that we were offering, which is like really high-end in-person one-on-one meetings and training, and throwing these like very elaborate events for our clients. We do this one in the fall every year called the Soiree, which kind of has taken on a life of its own. We had like last year was like 1,000 of our past clients and friends would come to this event that we throw. And it can't happen. So you'd think as a real estate agent, you work for a brokerage. We all know how it works. And you go sell a house and you pay them a split. You pay them part of what you make on that transaction to the brokerage. And the last thing you want to be wondering as an agent is like, what are they doing with that money? Like what, is this just making them rich? Are they pocketing this? And now that they're not doing anything, right? Like the real estate market hasn't completely collapsed, but we're not doing the events anymore. And I'm not seeing them as much anymore. Like what are they doing? What we did and what I think, agents should be kind of demanding of their brokerage is like even more support, and I'm taking notes as Shay's talking about like these Santa Zoom calls. It's brilliant, by the way. But it's using platforms like this. We've seen like a dramatic uptick in video emails. They've been around forever, right? And like we have G Suite at E&V, and so like Cloud HQ is a really easy plugin to send video emails. And like the consumers seeing your face actually more than they were before. And the advisors are seeing my face more than they were before, potentially, because instead of just shooting off an email that I wrote, I'm just talking to them and then sending it, in addition to like more FaceTime calls happening than ever. So the kind of the changes that we started to do was like, okay, and I'm very proud of our staff people here at E&V Minneapolis, because they all said, what can we do? Like, what can we do to help these guys get through this super weird time? And they're going through it too, but just in a different capacity, because, the agents are owning their own business and they don't know which direction the business is going. People just, they said, how can we step up and show them that we're still here and that we care?
Yeah, I think culture is one of the things that has been underappreciated in real estate, but you're seeing more and more of that means something in real estate, especially at the brokerage level. It's good to see you building that.
Being magnified, if you had a culture before, it's probably even stronger now. And if you had a pretty weak one before, it's probably even weaker than it was before. But to the agents that are on here and they're watching this, like if you're hearing what Jeff said and what Shay said, about that, if you're able to recognize that maybe this has exposed some weaknesses in your systems, in your businesses or whatever, like recognize that this has exposed it, and then see what you can do to improve that, because there will be a next time. Hopefully it's not another like major pandemic or a housing crash, but there's going to be something, every 10, 12 years, something happens that the course of business changes, and the more solid those foundations and those structures and systems are, the better you can handle it.
It's a really good point. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, all of that is fabulous. And if I remember correctly, well before this pandemic hit, you were one of the early adopters of virtual technology to bring people in and go see homes, without having to leave your office. And so you were prepared for some of this in advance because you were a little bit more forward thinking. There's a question that just came up in the chat room that I want to answer live, and I want everyone's input on it because I think it's something important to remember. Shay talks about, and everyone's talking about, they're actually having a better year. And so I think it's probably irresponsible of us not to also address the other things that a pandemic exposes. And one of the things that the pandemic has exposed, and Harry Greenberg, thank you for your question, is this gap that exists in society. And it's actually not that surprising that the impact of COVID-19 on this upper end of the bracket, where the majority of home sales take place, was not only not impacted, but actually may have benefited from it. Whereas the lower end of the scale, and that where a potential impact on minorities and the underserved, it has a potentially negative impact in the other direction that we won't see immediately because it lags so far behind. So I think it's an interesting side to address as a result of how, as the real estate industry, how do we come out of this pandemic and address these issues through real estate and through technology and through all of the resources we have to try and raise that up a bit and bring them into home ownership.
And that's something that actually Shay and I noticed the other day. We have a lot of friends in Hawaii who sell real estate. And for the first time, local Hawaiians have had a crack at the inventory, right? Because so much of it had been bought by out of
Wow.
state buyers, right? So now you've got Hawaiians coming in thriving for this. So let's talk about that then, right? Because I wanted to talk about tech and processing solutions, which are needed now. I think no matter what, if we're addressing affordability, what has definitely happened is that the spike in appreciation and in pricing has left a lot of people out in the cold. It's going to take longer for folks who couldn't buy even before COVID, even longer to buy now. Shay, in your Chicago, Minneapolis, I look at the stats there and go, oh my God, what I was selling in St. Louis Park a couple of years ago is almost double now, right? So let's talk about that. What tech will you guys be using going forward? Tech process system that narrow down to one or two that are the most effective to create a path to educate people. What will you be doing to address people who are priced out now, but are using technology to educate themselves, to learn about saving for a down payment, maybe saving for a home? Shay, I know you do a good job. Let's start with you. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, so we use a CRM called RealVolve, and so we have drip campaigns that go out to our clients. So like for prospective buyers, we have a 2-year drip campaign where they hear from us monthly on ways they can increase their credit score and information they need to learn about in order to eventually be able to buy a home. And I think that kind of educational content is going to be even more important going forward for buyers, because there's probably going to be a longer cycle now before they're able to buy. And so if you can help them start to understand, how they can repair their credit, how they can pay down their debt faster, those kinds of things, and bring in financial planners, bring in lenders, bring in experts, if that's not your area of expertise, video them and share that content with people, kind of become their go-to resource for a long-term path to home ownership. I think that that's really going to be needed and help. And so for me, that's what we're really focusing on, because, I do think it's going to take longer for people to be able to afford homes, especially your gig workers and hourly workers and things like that, than they have in the past, because they've been really impacted by COVID.
Jeff, what about you from the enterprise level? I hate the term. I hate lead generate. I hate that term. No one likes being thought about as leads. I think that if anything about COVID should die. But if we're talking about like just trying to modernize kind of some legacy terms, lead curation, mind share building. Shay does it really well. Jeff has talked about it. How do you get people to not think about lead generation, think more about that person you affect today could lead to business in a year and get you more business in between now and then?
It's really, really interesting that you bring this up. And one of the things, Nobu, you may know this, like England Volkers has quite a bit of differences in their brand versus a lot of other of the franchise brands out there, all the way down to some of just the verbiage we use. You may have noted today, I don't call our agents, we call them advisors. We don't have brochures in properties, we call them exposés. And one of the kind of the fundamental changes in mindset that when an agent becomes an advisor with us that we try to get them to get rid of is that idea of lead generation. Like you said, I think it's a negative word, to be honest with you, like looking at a human as a lead. So we say, don't lead gen, view everything you do as a referral source, not a lead generation system, because everything is a referral source. Even if you pay Zillow for leads, when you get one, you don't look at it as a lead. You look at it as the Zillow just gave you a referral. You may have compensated them to get in front of that person, but if you view that person as a referral from Zillow, it's just a simple change in mindset. And so it can be anything from, sub-market strategy. It can be if you actually are compensating a company to receive those referrals, like a Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, we know all of them. working with a lender partner that you enjoy and viewing them as a referral partner, not a lead source. It's just a simple, it's just a change in mindset and calling it something different. And then all of a sudden, you start treating that situation differently than if it's just a lead. Like nobody likes to call back leads. I love calling back referrals, you know, like, and it's just a simple mind shift.
Yeah. Well, it seems that that's kind of the first case, right? An ideological shift will make you actually use everything else that you've got in your system better, right? It's been forever. How do I use my CRM? It's not about how you. It's not about what it is. How you actually use it. Jeff, I mean, is there tech coming down the pipeline? Because as you and I both know, Wall Street, VC, they're not spending money on search portals anymore, right? It's this stuff that we're talking about. What are you seeing? What trends are the companies that you're working with? What are they acting off of? What should we know in terms of this building mind share online for offline sales?
So there's a couple of different trends that people are following. We talked about one already. You know, there's a huge focus on removing friction from the back end of the transaction, because when you think about, look at reviews that you get or feedback you get from customers. When they're talking about problems in the transaction, what are they talking about? They're rarely talking about search. They're rarely talking about what happened before you signed the contract. They're talking about all of those things that took place from the moment you signed a contract to the moment you closed, the vast majority of which aren't controlled really by the realtor. They're influenced by the realtor. The realtor can improve communications. And so the streamlining and automating of that will improve communications and in the end have an overall sort of raises all boats kind of effect. When the streamlining of that becomes universal, the problems for the most part in a standard transaction, whatever that is, get mitigated by better systems, less friction, better communication that's happening dynamically. And that's the other side of where I focus my attention when I'm looking at like the true future of technology. Forget about just real estate technology. The true future of technology lies in natural language processing, artificial intelligence. And I could talk about this all day long. We are going to talk to our computers and computers are going to talk to us. Computers are already calling us. If I go onto my phone right now and I try to book through Google Assistant a reservation at a restaurant, and that restaurant doesn't have a connection with OpenTable or some other automation tool that allows them to do it that way, a computer with a human voice calls that restaurant and makes that reservation. That happens today in 48 out of 50 states. The only two states that it doesn't happen in are Kentucky and Louisiana, and I will not make a joke about that. And so we are experiencing since 2012, which is called the modern age of artificial intelligence, a 300,000% growth in computer processing speed. We've never seen anything like it. And as a result, these machine learning systems and everything that are happening are creating systems for understanding language that are going to bring tools to real estate and to other avenues that are going to make our jobs easier. You know, you will, I'm saying this as a matter of fact, Jeffrey, you will provide to your agents a tool at some point in the near future that allows them to focus on human interaction while an extremely intelligent natural language processing assistant answers common questions that are coming in from the web, from yard signs. It's going to hold multiple conversations at once. It's never going to get tired. It's never going to be rude. It's never going to make a mistake. And then when it comes time for the expertise of the realtor to insert itself, that assistant will pass you off just like a human assistant, and you will swoop in and do the job that only humans can do. To me, that's the real work of real estate. That you know, Shay's contacting divorce attorneys right now. Why? Because if you've got two houses on a street, they're both the same model. One's selling the house because they're having a baby. One's selling the house because they're getting a divorce. Two completely different approaches to the conversations. Two completely psychology. Like that requires an expert. That requires someone who understands the difference in the fiduciary responsibility between those two things. Let the computers, the trend is computers do all that stuff, the mundane stuff that a computer does best. Human, focus on human stuff. Focus on wisdom, focus on relationships. That's, to me, that's where we're headed. It's a train that will not be stopped.
I think it's fascinating to be a fly on the wall in some of these companies that have come out boasting that they have some of the most solid predictive analytic tools in real estate, because I think it's hard to predict anything after about March 10th. I think if you'd have asked me in April, would we be sitting in a real estate market like we're sitting right now in November, I would have said no. I'm glad that we are, but predictive analytics really got tossed in the dryer, through this whole thing, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, a lot of it's still in its infancy. The data needs to be refined. The thinking computers need to think more. But what we're talking, though, at the end of the day, is distilling down customer service versus this idea of like what you aren't anymore. You're not there just to answer the phone anymore. You are there to positively, right, acknowledge my need and respond to me how I would like it in the way that I need to know, and give me the aha moment that I didn't need to know, that I needed to know, that I didn't know to Google. Right?
I think there's an awakening, right? There's an awakening through this pandemic of the importance of these human relationships, of the importance of the ability to have a conversation with a real, live human being who understands my problems, who can connect me in a real way, whether that's happening via a Zoom video conference or whether that's happening with you sitting next to me on my couch. Is one better than the other? Well, it depends. It really does depend. And that's why, to me, there's a lot of hope for me that comes out of this shared experience that the consumer and the realtor is having, because this immovable object that is sometimes traditional real estate has been forced to move. It's like those rocks in the desert that you can see the trail. They're moving slowly, they're moving. Well, somebody picked one up and moved it about 6 feet. And I think that's what we're seeing happening. The rock just got picked up and moved 6 feet. And we're all feeling that impact. How you deal with it ultimately is the win.
So let's talk about this. Like we know it's coming. We know what's changed. What are you preparing to do? So Shay, you're an everyday average agent, team lead, knowing what we've gone through in the last 6 months, but also knowing that some will stick, some won't. What's one or two things that you will definitely be doing differently long term because of what you've experienced over the last 4, 5, 6 months?
I mean, Zoom calls for sure. Like, before we would oftentimes do new buyer consultations, just, via phone initially and then in person. And I love doing them via Zoom now. I can have that face-to-face with people. I can see them in their house and kind of get an understanding of what their environment is like, so that will stick. Same thing with listing presentations. We've also become much more specialized. Like we have a stager now who goes into their homes with them and helps them, goes through via Zoom the first time to help them declutter and then goes in before photos. We've added a lot of video capabilities, so I've got the DJI Osmo pocket camera, so for each listing we're doing just more online stuff, right? So we've got our photos, we've got our floor plan, we've got our Matterport tour, but now we're doing a narrated tour of the house on that DJI Osmo pocket, and also more so the neighborhood, right? Because we're seeing, I think, around the country, people are realizing they don't have to be tied to where they were living anymore because their work may be virtual going forward, right? So we have a lot of people in Chicago moving to Michigan and Indiana and buying lake homes, and they're planning to live there for the next couple of years, right? So I think, doing neighborhood tours for people who aren't going to come to town, or don't know that area is really important, so we're doing a lot of those. So I think, that will stick as well. Those are kind of the two things I can think of off the top of my head.
Jeffrey, what about you from the broker owner perspective?
It's definitely determining which side of the aisle Jeff was kind of talking we want to be on, and then going kind of 100% in on that. I mean, I think we've just gone through really probably 8 years of you could get into the real estate industry and there's enough kind of going on that you could find some success, even with no real compass, I guess, if you will, because let's be honest. There are some houses in the market we're in with a lack of inventory that putting a sign out on the ground and getting it onto the MLS is sometimes it's enough. Now you get to the back end, what Jeff talked about, and that can certainly be where things fall apart. But we've gone now, I think that the real estate industry is going in these two very different directions, and anyone that's kind of caught in the middle is just going to get kind of thrown off to the side. So you've got this like accelerator mega team funneling through, like really adopting some of this AI and trying to get as much business as they can. And then you have these like the other side that Jeff said, where you have this consumer standing there going, just help me. Just help me. And then there's going to always be people for that. So, we've kind of adopted down that pathway of like, we're going to hold your hand and, we're going to do what it takes to get through. So it's finding different methods. It's not always technology. It can be non-technological systems and or feelings that we're trying to present in those situations. And that's what we're really trying to identify with some new things that come out and studying them and seeing, does it enhance that aspect of where we want to go, not trying to be something we're not.
Has it changed the way you recruit or attract agents? Are you thinking hard? I know, Shay, you were building your team during this time as well. Has it made you rethink the people that you're hiring?
100%. We've always kind of boasted a little bit about being somewhat selective and a little more picky. But this is maybe even, I hate to like beat this word again, but maybe even magnify that even more. What somebody has to prove to us now in the middle of an interview, whether it's, in person or it's over a Google Hangout or whatever it is, they have to kind of prove to us that they've dealt with some adversity in their life and they've figured out a way to get past it. Because that has really shown itself over the past 6 months of those that are having their best year ever, and not forgetting about the people that aren't. And it's not because they're not good at not dealing with adversity, but this is new for everybody. You have to be able to deal with that in some capacity. And if you've shown that you have the ability to deal with some adversity and challenges and figure out a way to adapt and work through it, like, we probably have a place for you. If not, there's a lot of other places.
Hey, Jeff, let me get Shay. Shay, be quick with that thought, because I know you had some thoughts on that, and Jeff will cap that the segment for that.
Sure. I mean, I think, for us, it's really looking for people who, kind of like everybody's saying, can still get up in the morning and work regardless of what chaos is going on around them. And then also people who are really empathetic right now, and people who are willing to like pick up the phone and call those clients, especially those clients that, that are struggling right now, those ones who are having trouble getting out of bed, right? People can pick up the phone, call them and say, hey, I just want to check in with you. Nothing real estate related. I just want to know how you're doing. Is there anything I can do to help you? Those are the relationships that will last, and those are the people that will be successful in the future. So, looking for people who are willing to grind it out right now, and frankly, also being willing to stick with the people on my team who are struggling a little bit, who maybe have young kids who are having a hard time doing e-learning and stuff, but, so they can't do the level of work that they were willing to do anymore. I think as a managing broker or as a team leader, you also have to be empathetic to that and try to figure out how are you going to help support your team, because we're all going through this insanity at the moment.
Yeah. I want to talk about another magnifier. Charlotte McDermott asked a question that I think is a very good one. She said she was surprised that 45 minutes into this, that no one had mentioned the incredibly low interest rates and what impact that was having on the frenzy and intensity of the market sales. How has this, like, stupid low interest rates been another magnifier on the intensity of all of this?
My personal feeling on that, just having a little bit of a 10,000 foot view over, a lot of transactions, is it certainly maybe got some people off the fence, but I don't think the motivation was necessarily caused. I think Shay's probably hit on it more of like, whatever they didn't like their house, they really noticed when they were home for 6 months, or whatever they didn't like their neighborhood, or the fact that they don't have to live within 20 minutes of their place of employment because they're never going back to that place of employment again, has caused them to move. What it has dramatically done, and we talked about it earlier, that, the more expensive houses maybe even benefiting more. It had, if you were a $600,000 buyer when rates were at 4.125 last year, and now they're 2.875, you're now a $900,000 buyer.
Yeah.
And for no good reason other than that interest rates went down. And so that has the average price points and these like big sales, interest rates have dramatically affected that. The motivations, that one's tough to predict.
I think on the flip side, though, too, you also have a lot of people who lending requirements have gotten a lot tighter over the last couple of months, right? You've got a lot of renovation loans that have gone away. Almost all bridge loans have gone away. You have to put down 20% now for most jumbo loans, and jumbo loan rates are not good, right? Jumbo loan rates are at like 4.5%, right? So yes, interest rates are low on conventional loans under jumbo loan limits, right? But there's also a whole host of other limitations in lending right now. So it's not just like, hey, it's a great time to buy for everybody because of interest rates. There's a small market it's a good time to buy for. But for a lot of other people, that's gotten harder to buy for. And so as an agent, you need to understand those things, right? And be able to explain that to your clients and say, hey, you can't do a bridge loan anymore. You can maybe do a HELOC instead and get 2 loans. Like, I think right now it's more important than ever that agents are incredibly educated on the lending market, which is changing on a weekly basis, so that you can have those conversations with your clients.
And I think beyond that too, I think one of the things that I think will affect Minneapolis a lot as well is the fact that you all are cheap Chicago. And it's not just the interest rates, it's the fact that in Chicago, the tax rate that we are getting just to live and for our housing is ridiculous, which is one of the reasons why we moved to Denver in the first place, right? So to me, sellers need exit strategies now. And buyers, they need to realize that, hey, there's a lot of other issues that are surrounding things other than interest rates that we need to be aware of. We've got 5 minutes left to talk about. Oh, we have some questions here. Okay, so we've got 2 questions. So Todd Shipman, hello, how are you? So
Todd's just stirring the pot.
Yeah. Let's talk about the political climate. Let's put it out there that the political climate really hasn't affected the demand, right? Let's put it out there, right? But maybe from the agent point of view, Jeffrey, right? Have you had any agents done anything dumb? How do you deal with chaos when chaos can hit home from the agent point of view?
Yeah, we certainly don't censor anybody, and I think that that's a very, very slippery slope. But I think we've all, and Todd is a consummate professional and a veteran of the industry, and probably shares some ideology here of, you say something really over the top that's politically charged, religiously charged, racially charged, whatever it is, you are going to just completely alienate 40 to 50% of the people that you knew or that knew you before. You just are. So it's important to have thoughts. It's important to have opinions. It's one of the coolest things about being a human. And we have these platforms now to share anything that we can possibly think of, but also knowing that you're probably not changing anyone's mind over Facebook. If you want to have those discussions, face-to-face interaction is probably best. And so now we have all these cool things like Zoom and Google Hangouts that everybody knows how to use, those kind of conversations. But it is a really interesting time, and boy, I'm praying that like first week of November things really settle down a bit on that category.
I mean, I think, as an agent, right, the political stuff doesn't matter, but it does matter how it affects housing, right? And so those are the conversations that I have with my clients in terms of, here is what I think is going to happen to the housing market in particular, depending on what happens with politics, here's how I think it's going to affect you in terms of interest rates, what your property is going to be worth, things like that, right? So take the politics out of it, but have conversations with your clients about how politics are affecting the housing market. That's what I would really focus on.
That's a very good RPAC plug, honey. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so how do you keep up with changes? I think that's a really good question, Mary Slatt. What is a news source for you guys, both in your business, maybe even outside of the industry, professionally, personally, that you guys look at to stay on top of things? Jeff, start with you.
Say that again. I'm reading through the questions. I apologize.
What do you do to keep up with change?
Oh, I'm a Feedly user. I have been for a long time. Feedly is a feed reader. Obviously, I actually got off of Facebook and Instagram and every Facebook owned, and that's a whole other story.
Yep.
And that probably speaks to Todd's question more than it speaks to anything else at this point. But I'm a Feedly addict, and so I have different topics. So I don't pay that much attention to mortgage, but hopefully you can translate how I'm going to answer into how you might utilize it. You can use Feedly for free, feedly.com, go do it. When you find a website like Mortgage Reports or fill in the blank, you add it to your feed reader and it feeds you this news on a morning basis. I'm a photography nut. The very first thing I do with my cup of coffee in the morning after I'm done hiking is I go to the photography feed of my Feedly and I read through the photography articles. It's my way of putting a smile on my face when I wake up in the morning. And so that's how I keep up with everything. Technology, news. I am proactive about seeking out the things that I want to learn rather than being reactive to what's happening in the feeds or what's being sent to me. I take a proactive approach. Yeah.
Feedly is a great aggregator for content that you want. Shay, yeah. Jeffrey, what do you guys use to keep on top of? So there's a question about mortgages. So maybe, mortgage or whatever industry-wise that you guys use to keep track of things.
So for me, I have a phone call every Tuesday with a very trusted mortgage lender, and I ask him, what's going on with mortgages?
That's a great idea.
Do we still have bridge loans? Do we still have 3% down? Do you anticipate those going away this week? I mean, but pre-COVID, I didn't need to do it because it didn't shift that much, right? But sometimes twice a week, we were having those phone calls in March and April because lending was changing so fast, right? So find a mortgage broker that you like and trust who knows, his or her stuff backwards and forwards. Set up a 15-minute call and find out what is going on. What are interest rates? What are they doing on jumbo loans? All that kind of stuff so that you can answer those questions for your clients.
Yeah, you're by the way, your board of directors, when you get all your people together, mortgage title lawyers, that's also a great idea you should be doing. Engage with your team. Your team are the people that put together the real estate experience. Jeffrey, what about you from the industry news or whatever point of view?
Yeah, so we get together every Thursday almost as a company for a little bit of a therapy session of sorts, where it's like, it used to be in person every Thursday at 9, and it's still happening every Thursday at 9. Some people decide they want to come in, but we also host it on Google Hangouts as well. And it's basically like, this is a judgment-free zone. Anything you're experiencing in your business, mortgage-wise, what's happening and what are you hearing? And through that source, we tend to hear things that I may not have found, I wouldn't have seen it on the news, I wouldn't have read about it in the paper, but it happened to a real life client or a real life real estate agent or a transaction. And so that tells us like, wow, guys, like we're now seeing like a bunch of appraisal waivers. Like they've all pretty much on every 20% down conventional mortgage. They're trying to get it by with an appraisal waiver because of the competitive offer situation, or that the appraisers aren't going into the house as much. And so I never would have seen that in the Star Tribune, but because we talk about that stuff every week and Tuesday, like what are you guys seeing out there? It tends to come up, in these meetings.
Amy Jurek asks a really good question. So this is to Shay and Jeffrey. Are either of you guys worried about mortgage forbearance issues? Do you fear a flood of foreclosures coming? Shay, yes or no? And why?
Yeah, and short sales. I'm already starting to see short sales.
So that's Chicago. That's Chicago. Yep. Jeffrey, what about you?
I'm not overly concerned about the foreclosure market, just because of the process of a foreclosure takes so long. And even if you're in forbearance or you're behind, unless you made some really, really poor decisions over the last like 5 to 8 years, you probably have a decent amount of equity in your house if you didn't just buy it, 8 months ago. And so, as you guys know, you have to be pretty far underwater, in order to have to go through that foreclosure process. So nothing like we saw before. I wouldn't say it's going to be of crisis levels. I think we're like under 2% of all home sales right now are foreclosures. Could we see that bump up to like 5? Sure. It's never going to get to 50 like it was in 2011. And that's just because of scarcity of houses to buy and equity that people have.
I think just real quickly, one of the things though is what people thought forbearance was and what it actually is are two different things. And so my fear around forbearance is that there was this notion that I can get a stay for a period of time. And at the end of that stay, I'll just go back to paying my normal mortgage, or that it would just automatically shift to the end of the mortgage. And if you were reading the articles about what was actually happening and what you actually can do, not that way at all. They may want you to pay it in addition to your mortgage over 3 months. You might be able to get them to extend it over 6 months. If you try to put it at the end of your mortgage, you may have to completely requalify for that mortgage. So there is some danger around that forbearance that I think is worth noting as well.
And just really, Amy Jurek, hi, long time no see. CoreLogic is actually putting out a lot of really good monthly reports on it. Just hit them up on their website, look for their foreclosure report. They're actually listing top 10, top 20 markets. I have not seen the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. Here in Denver, though, we are in the top 10. So something we'll be looking out for. You guys, thank you so much. It's been an hour and 4 minutes of awesome talk. Anytime I could talk real estate with you, Jeff and Jeffrey, it's awesome. Shay, this is every day for us. It's good Lord, it's boring. But thank you guys so much. You know, I miss Minnesota. Miss you, Jeffrey. Jeff, this has been great. I can't gush enough about the
awesome
last
as
hour
always
with you guys. Y'all have been great. Thank you so much. And if I can do one last plug for North Star MLS, thank you for sponsoring. And you know, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about today really starts with them. Turn that stuff into wisdom, and you guys are going to be okay. So, y'all, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks,
and
everybody.
Hey, have a good day.
Thank you, everybody. Real quick, thank you, Nobu, and thank you, Jeff, Jeffrey, and Shay. And also, again, thanks to North Star MLS for sponsoring this today. We do have, real quick, 2 winners of the gift cards for the Minnesota Realtors online store. And I'm just looking for their names. I just have them. Sorry about that.
They're not in front of you, Lori?
Yeah, they were. There they are. Okay, first one is Renee Erlinson from Elcor Realty of Rochester. And the second is Neil Thiessen from Central Minnesota Realty. And we will also send them emails directly. But congratulations, winners of the gift cards. And again, you guys, thank you so very, very much for today. And hopefully we can see you in person in 2021. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.